Hello, hi Shubham, how are you?
Hello, hey Manas, I'm fine. How's you?
I'm good as well. Thank you so much for showing up on time, first of all. And before we begin, I just wanted to give you a quick overview of what the procedure for this interview will be. So it's going to be a short 40 to 45-minute call, and we are probably going to focus around core concepts of game development and game programming. And any questions on this, you can bring it up beforehand before we begin. So I'll give you like a countdown before I start, and we'll do a quick intro, and then we'll hop into more uh, questions as we go on. So any questions on this so far?
No, not at this point of time. Eventually, if I'll surely be to ask.
Okay. I'll start the timer, and then we can begin. It's fine.
Yep, that's fine.
Okay, let's begin in like five, four, three, two, one. Yep. Okay. Hi Shubham. First of all, can you give me like a quick intro of what kind of games you worked on, what your background is, etc.?
Yep, sure. My name is Shubham, as you already know. Apart from it, academically, I graduated in 2019. So I have been to various places, right? I've been a game developer. I've, graduated from Outscal course, wherein I learned how to create scalable games. So therein I worked on different projects. For example, tank game, right? That's one of my projects. Then a multiplayer Pocket Tanks clone that I have worked on. Apart from it, I also worked on a team project inculcating, team vibe key, how real software is made. So that was a Skyforce game that we worked on. So yeah,
Got
so
it.
these are the major games I have worked on.
Okay. And what kind of engines have you used so far in your program?
Also, I have used Unity engine as the primary one, but as far as the essence of a programmer goes, if you know logic, you can shift to any engine. So yeah, so I'm cool with any engine, no problems with that.
Okay. Okay. So since you worked on so many projects, like, can you give me an idea of what kind of games you want to work on, why you've applied for this position, etc.?
Okay, so it is related to me personally. Like I want to work on games that everyone can play and feel the experience of those stories coming alive. I want to talk to these guys through my games, convey my feelings, and I want to go ahead, create mobile games for that purpose, because everyone holds a mobile nowadays, right? So that gives me a lot of reach in terms of that. I also want to pursue complex games, because some games that I really loved from the childhood are, yes, complex, but they had a profound effect on me, creating me, making me as a game developer. Yep, so that would be my answer. Yes.
Got it. So over here, like you mentioned games that are complex. In this context, did you simply mean games that are complex to make, or do you mean games that are complex to play?
So I meant, the most complex part of games is to get all the art like integrated into the game. Like game has storytelling, game has this dialogue system, game has that programming. So programming being one of the most complex part of the puzzle, where I want to work, but I want to see a game as a whole picture, not just I'm programming and just creating that, but a whole picture, a whole world that I want people to explore, feel in, right? Be a part of. So that is what I want. That is what I meant by complexity, right?
Hmm, got it. So, okay, you mentioned a good word that we can jump off of. So you mentioned something called puzzles. So since you are into more complex and games that are played by a wider audience, let's just start off with a problem statement for a puzzle game that almost everyone might have played. So have you ever played Candy Crush? Have you seen how it works, etc.?
So yep, I have seen Candy Crush, right? And
Hmm.
I hate that game. Uh
Okay.
like because going ahead, I don't get that thrills. I played it. I am more of a FPS kind of guy. I be like shooting and all. I need action, right? So that is my
So
genre.
got it. So do you think you would be do you think these games are easy to make, first of all?
Candy
Since you're
Crush one or FPS?
Candy Crush.
No, these games are not that easy to make because you can see the surface and be like, it's so easy, right? I can make it in a day. When you sit down, right? It's like in some way, going ahead, thinking the complexity of scalability at times because Candy Crush, if you see, is played by million users, right? So you have to be able to make a game that scales up to that much. So that is the major challenge. The basic mechanics are not that difficult to implement, but the challenge is to be able to scale it up to those 1,000 users. Keep the game fresh. So that is very difficult to do.
So, okay, since you're already into FPS, obviously I won't be asking you about FPS since you might have already researched. Let's stay on Candy Crush and try to figure out how you'd approach creating your own Candy Crush clone of sorts, right? So, say I come to you with a match 3 game and I want you to create a simple system that lets me make 1,000 levels or 1,500 levels. How would you
Mhm.
approach this problem, and what would be the pieces that you think would be required to solve this problem?
Okay, so cool. So can I get a few seconds to think it over? Like, you know?
No issue. No issue.
Okay, cool. Mhm. So am I allowed to, share my screen for a
Yeah.
few seconds? The problem statement, if I rightly understood, is to make a Candy Crush game clone. Am I right?
Yes.
Okay. Uh, cool. So you want 1,000 levels, right, in that game, so that we are able to cater to a lot of people. Like we get a great retention.
Yep.
So herein, uh, we need to look the way I am looking at it. There are a lot of perspective. So I'll be, focusing on the major programming perspective, yes. But apart from it, I'll be looking on to some other things as well, right? So, for example, business perspective,
Hmm.
if I look at, right, I'll just give you a brief about it, then we'll move on to the programming one. So business perspective, first, we'll need to see how other games of these genres are doing. Is there a saturation point in the games? What all players are playing these games? What are revenues like? So I hope that is some other team that would have done it, but still, it is interesting to know that, so that going ahead as a programmer, I can add more creativity to it and solve these business problems as well at times, right? So then going ahead, I'll go ahead and break the game down module by module, right? So I'll be looking at so Candy Crush game, first, the rules of the games are, it is similar to Connect 3, right? So minimum 3 should be connected. Maximum you can have say n number of connections, and these candies break, and then the other candies goes down, right? So that is rule one. Apart from it, with the information that you provided, I know that we need 1,000 levels, right? So if we need 1,000 levels, one way to go about it is by manual level design. So that is not the approach I would want to take, because tomorrow you might come to me and say, Shubham, now build 2,000 levels. And I will like, again, we do the manual. So it's better to have something procedurally generated, levels. Okay, so majorly we'll try to code some algorithm so that the levels that we are presenting are procedurally generated, and we don't need to set everything up, right?
Hmm.
So apart from it going ahead, this some of the constraints here in this level design procedurally generated one would lie with the level designers. For example, there are some levels which have some restrictions in the Candy Crush. For example, there are some parts you can't actually swap, right? So the same level, you just randomly at that part you can't swap, and then you have to figure out the puzzle, right? So that is something that can be done. So that is, that lies with the design team. So going ahead as a programmer, so looking at all these things, first of all, I'll be breaking it down into modules and thinking how these modules would be interacting, right? Without, going into the code, because that way I'll have, some kind of, path to go on and be able to say ki acha, this is how the game might work towards the end, right? So the first module is the core mechanic, right? Core mechanic, if I say, is going ahead, connect three or more, right? So
Hmm.
herein, then we have need something like a board setup, right? An empty board setup. So which is actually nothing but a matrix, right? In mathematics, we have used matrix. So going
Hmm.
ahead, what I can do is I can imagine it like an in an Excel, right, where we are connecting three, right? So that way, I can have all the positions, right? Just let me open up Excel so that we are able to visualize it better. So just a second. Yeah. So for example, this is A1, this is B1, C2, C1. So, the way we code, we know all the cells and the names of it, right?
Hmm.
So once the board is set up, once, we have had that matrix set up, right? Then we'll init the level by using the procedural generation. Once the
Hmm.
level is initialized, now the control is not with us, right? It is with the player, with the
Hmm.
player. So now, next mechanic that we need to give the player is, on touch. We need to have some events, because I'm thinking of in mobile terms, right? Not
Hmm.
in like PC terms, but if we need it in PC, we can have control setup, right? I hope, like, are you with me on this,
Yep. So
Anas?
far, so
Mm.
good. Yep. You can go ahead.
Awesome. So when we touch, right, going ahead, so what do we need? We need some kind of swapping, right? Swapping. So one thing I missed here is checking if three connected. That is winning condition, right? So
Hmm.
I'll have to work on it. So this checking would be running a lot, right? So this is one thing, if I'm working on, that I might need to think over and optimize, like not optimize it from the start, but this is something that would be running a lot. So it would be wise to work on it in such a way that you are able to, it is actually fast, right? Then going ahead, we are done with this checking. Once the swap is done, checking is done. Once this checking is done, if the winning condition is reached, right? So we need to have a goal. So goal may be like splash, sorry, splash 100 candies. And one more thing, with this goal, I just had an idea. So we need 1,000 levels, but we can reuse levels and change the goals, right? Maybe splash 10 green candy, 20 blue candy. So something like that, interesting, but that would increase the complexity of the code. We can keep
Hmm.
it, it's good to have, but right now we'll be thinking in terms of MVP. So these are the things MVP is like, uh, just give prototype, right? Simple
Yeah.
prototype.
Minimum viable product. You
Yeah,
mean? Okay.
minimum viable product. Yep. I
Got it.
just forgot the uh, cool. So
Okay.
this
No
is
issue.
the goal, right? Going
Yep.
ahead, and once the goal is reached, we'll just again unlock the levels, unlock levels. If we are using that unlock, we can send them to the next level, if the goal is completed. So that is how the main game loop, as I'm thinking, would run, right?
Okay. Okay. Let me ask you a question. So over here you mentioned procedural generation, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what all will be procedurally generated? So for your game, you mentioned like you set up the board, you set up the controls, etc. But
Mm-hmm.
outside of that, what the player needs to achieve, for example, right? what is the goal? How do you take care of procedural on that,
So you are
right?
talking about
So
procedurally generated goals. Yes.
would you do them procedurally generated, or what is a better approach to them, etc., etc.?
Yep. So we can also do that. So first of all, let's even break this down, because the way I was thinking, I wasn't thinking in terms of generating goals procedurally, right? But yes, why not do that too? So goals also gen procedural. So herein, first is procedural generation of the game board itself, right? So what we can do, we can, herein have parameters, right? These parameters can be something like, say, matrix size, okay. One is that कि कितना बड़ा matrix हो सकता है, right? How much candies do we want total, right? Then we can have which amount of which candies do we want. If you have seen Candy Crush, they have 5 different types of candies. They have more, but first we'll it's better to try out with 3 or 4, then scale it up, so that you are able to unit test it better. So then number of candies you can have, right? मतलब कौन से number की क्या candy है. Then thinking of procedurally generated, right? Let me just take a few seconds and think of the parameters. Matrix size is there, number of candies, right? So uh, all candies might also have variable called is swap, right? So we can randomly turn it on and off that way. If it is a swap, you can swap. If it is not, you cannot swap. So it gives us, with the same level, with the same board setup, but a very different feel to each and every level, right? With just this small thing, right? Then going ahead, so these are the
Okay.
parameters, right?
Uh, so once you finalize these parameters, right?
Mm-hmm.
Say matrix. You're saying you have a matrix. So how would you go about storing such a matrix inside your game?
Can you repeat?
How would you go about setting up this matrix inside your code, or inside basically your game on the backend side of things?
Okay, cool. So okay, so simple. You can have 2 for loops. You can use an array. Like we all are taught that basic thing. So we can go that primitive way, but there are a lot of other ways you can also deal with that. Right, going
Uh,
ahead.
yeah, what structure would you use just to represent this matrix inside code?
Okay. So first of all, I need to understand what all operations would I be doing, right? Then only I can choose the data structure. So it would have a lot of, we'll be needing a lot of swapping, right? Swapping from random values, one thing, because you have that candy, that is one use case. Apart from it, what would be needing? If candies is destroyed, we need to change a lot of position values as well, right? If I go with, any data structure that is complex. So arrays, I'll go with arrays, right? Because these two operations are fastest in arrays, right? So with that, that would work. Like 2D array would be my answer.
Okay, so 2D array, how do 2D array, what would be the lookup for, say, I want to access, when you say 2D array, I'm guessing if it's like a 5 by 5 grid, right?
Yep.
Would you make like a 5 by 5 array behind the scenes as well?
Yes, in some way I'm thinking about that.
Okay, and so what would you store? What kind of array would it be? What data will be stored inside one particular cell in this case?
So okay, we would be needing a vector actually, because this is procedurally generated. We need a parameter is metric size, so that would be a vector, so that we can grow it any way we want, right? So yeah, I like to correct that statement.
Okay, so what kind of vector would it be though? What data type would you use to set
I'll
up
be
such
going
a?
with integer. Reason being,
Hmm.
because it would be really really fast, right? If I take any string or any if I define an array of my own custom defined data type, so then it would
Hmm.
be slower because it would have a lot of data in just that one cell. So I'm looking at creating some kind of integer, right?
Hmm. So,
So
question
mhm.
here would be how many types do you expect max? So, how many values can this integer take in your opinion in this particular scenario?
Hmm. Can you just elaborate the question? What do you really want to ask? I'm not getting it. Like,
Say there are only six types of candies, like we discussed, or max
okay.
five types of candies.
Mm-hmm.
Why do
Mm-hmm.
I need to use an integer which can take? Do you know how many values an integer can take?
Okay, so that is what you are saying.
Yep.
So, okay, so practically it would be enough, right? So I don't really remember the integer range, right?
It,
That
but
is
you
what you are
know where
asking,
I'm
right?
getting. Yeah, that's why I'm
Ye
asking. If I only need to set up five values, why do I need to use an int?
okay, makes sense. So there is a reason I'm setting integers because the matrix would be integers, but we'll be working with enums for the types of candies, and you can translate each integer into enum really seamlessly. So that is one small trick I wanted to work on. Right, that way I'll be managing whole of the structure. So that was my vision going ahead. So, and if you are asking key integer, what is the maximum value you can, have and minimum value of, so I don't really remember those values because you can always Google it up. So yeah.
Yeah, the question here is not the fact that integer. Why can't I use a character which I know will take, say, uh, it can only take 255 values, and there might be a chance that it takes less space as well, right?
Okay,
Compared to
good
an
question.
integer because of the sheer
Loved it.
number of values it can.
Because when you do comparisons for the character now, if you
Hmm.
have an uppercase or a lowercase, it would fuck up the code, right? Because what I've seen with my experience, right, I used to use tags in Unity, right? So
Hmm.
if you ever for example, if I write a t with a tree with a capital T, and if I try to equate that tag with a small t, right, I'll be finding out the error. And at times I won't be even thinking of this might be the error, because that is such a minor mistake. So I want to avoid that. That is one reason I'm using the integers. uh,
Hmm.
that is why I'm not using characters, plus the enum reason, because enum can be really fastly converted into this integers and integers to enums. So enum would increase the readability of the code, right? For example, if you are reading, if you see somewhere it is equated to 5, you'll be like, what is this 5? Right? Is he mad? I don't know, right? But if you read, candy type dot cotton candy, internally it is 5. Your matrix knows it, but now you can read it up, right? So that gives the power of the character, the readability to the code, but also the speed of that integer, right? And also reduces that fuck up with the character. So that is where
Got
why
it.
I'm make sense.
Okay. Yep. Cool. Let's continue. You wanted to go ahead and initialize the level now that the board setup is done.
Yeah. So majorly board setup is done. We'll have to think more on parameter because I could only get these three. So while
Yep.
working on the game, you get a lot of ideas, right? So that is when you can,
Hmm.
go ahead and change it. But for a MVP, I'll be sticking to just three. I'll be doing the bare minimum so that I could see this game running, right? Once it is up there, then we can think more about it. So that is how,
Got.
we can build it up. So second is goal also, generated procedurally. So with
Hmm.
these, matrix values, the way it is set up, right? Then you can see if, one randomly generated goal system could be, it sees the maximum number of, maximum number of which type of candy we have. And, then you can swap it out, right? You can say, okay, in this level you have the metadata because of that, matrix, and according to that set a goal, right? So if you have,
Hmm.
say, 4 blue candies, you say, okay, so now you have to at least burst 10 blue candies, right? So that is a bit challenging because these are low in number, right? So then, according to that, when you are, putting in the new ones, right, so this becomes a parameter, because just imagine you destroy a blue one, right? Then you get more, you should get more blue one, so that, the level works. So the goal
Hmm.
also, helps you define uh, the next incoming or initialization of candies once the old candies are destroyed, right?
Got it. So
So
how would you take care of the difficulty if it's completely procedurally generated, right? So how would you tweak the difficulty in a way, say level 10 is supposed to be easier, level 100 is supposed to be slightly tougher, level 900 is supposed to be extremely tough. So your
ASWAP,
system makes
uh,
it so.
so we'll be not using ASWAP in the first 100 levels, right? We'll be using it later on because you're locking those. So people, we want them to give some easier levels. Then from 100 to 200, we'll have at max of 5 to 10 ASWAP that are locked, right? So that is one way to manage
Hmm.
difficulty. So it depends, matrix size. You might, have a really big matrix size, right? In the starting levels, then you can, uh, juggle it up, and make sure you have some empty matrix spaces, right? You can also have some of these, right? So you'll think of more parameters, because board setup is what makes the level, right? And therein for this problem you need to first thing creatively use the parameters. Second thing, think about more parameters that can help you tweak, these kind of problems. So like I said, for is swap, then number of candies 1 to 100, you might have, 5 types of candies, right? 100 to 200, you can have, say, two more types of candies adding in, plus the power ups. You can, what you can do, you can nerf the power ups eventually, right? If a power up, say, goes in and, breaks 10 candies after 100 level, you know uh it is not able to break 10 candies, it is maybe able to break 5, right? So something of that sort. So that
Okay.
is something that can be up.
Okay. Cool. Let's continue. You were talking about these goals that you were going to make procedural using empty matrix spaces.
Yep. So these goals uh depends on, the board generation, the procedural board generation. We can have, we have metadata about all this, right? Board. So with that we can have goals like, just imagine if you have, say, n number of candies for blue, right? So what you can go ahead and do, set the goal key. Okay, so n plus 10 number of blue candies should be bursted, right? And you can also keep a log of these goals. Eventually you can also use that to see कि अच्छा these goals are already randomly generated, we don't want to use it, or maybe, after level 100, pick up just two goals from the goal log and put it up there, and maybe make one new random goal, right? So that way you are reusing that which is already done. So that can, also save us time in the longer run, right? And make things interesting, right?
Got it. So over here, say I am a designer and I say I don't want to do it procedurally, right? I want to
Mhm.
have fine-grained control about what the difficulty is, and I want to make sure I at least play the levels first before they are published, for example. So
Mhm.
because it's procedurally generated, can I say that you won't have complete control over how the level is going to function or how the level is going to look?
Okay. So now there comes in one thing. If you need it fully procedurally generated, then you can't control it, right? So I was thinking over it. So majorly, for example, if you're playing level 100, right? Every time it reloads, it is a different level, right? It is a different level. So
Hmm.
if you need it to be same, consistent, So I'll go with the consistent one, right? So once that is randomly generated for you, right? So okay, one amazing parameter we can also see that hidden achievement that that sees the way you play the game and accordingly set up the board, right? Key, for example, you crack red candies a lot, so that way
Hmm.
it can see what is your play style and then set up the board. But to get back to the question that you asked, you can fine tune these parameters, right? I can give you some kind of scriptable object, right? Maybe the designer can right click, new, and have scriptable object, set up some variables in that and plug it into this levels. When the level is being created, the scriptable object would be used and the new level is created. If you need that fine tuning and custom level management, right? If you are not okay, then too it's procedurally generated, but it is heavily controlled by you, right? Then these parameters I would be picking up randomly, but now I have a person who is giving the parameters. You don't need to touch the code. You just need to right click, create a new scriptable, add in all the parameters, and the code would do the rest. So that is one way. The other approach, is that you select everything randomly, no human intervention. You can have n number of levels, different combinations of these parameters giving you different combinations of levels. So that is one thing.
Got it. So your scriptable object, what would it contain? Would it simply contain only the parameters that you mentioned here, or do you think more stuff needs to be added that is missing, that we've not taken into account?
Majorly, these parameters as of now for this MVP, and
Hmm.
as we go more deeper into it, we'll get more problems, obviously, right? Then we can add or subtract things. But at this point of things, uh, what I'm looking at, these parameters might be enough for that, right? It's
Got
just the creative usage of this and how do they plug in, right? So if you have 1,000 levels, but there is one thing, you need those thousands scriptable objects to be set up, right? Because now you want the fine control. If you don't, then it can randomly work as well. So you can have one endless mode with procedural regeneration and one campaign mode for players who really want that experience of everything to the point, right? And already tested out. So you can have two different experiences made just out of this, right?
So let me give you an example. Say you do it with procedural generation, like you
Mm-hmm.
say. You set up everything fine, but at the beginning, a match happens automatically. Like
Mm-hmm.
the way the board is set up, one match is happening. So that
Mm-hmm.
match happens, some candies disappear, some few more candies drop in.
Mm-hmm.
Another match happens, and
Mm-hmm.
again candies are disappearing. So when you do procedural generation, again over here, can you do complete randomization, or do you think there is a way to take care of this problem as well?
Okay, so actually, first thing, Manas, nothing is randomized in this world, right? Because
Hmm.
if we are coding that stuff, then too we are controlling random dot random in some way. But going ahead to answer your question, I would like to say कि yes, it is super simple. You just go ahead and check key, if in the matrix one more layer of check, if these candies are bursting, then replace these candies. Then check if it is bursting, then replace to a point where nothing is bursting. But I won't go that there because as a player, when these things fall in place itself, I am so happy. I believe मेरे को कुछ करना ही नहीं पड़ा, bro. It's like it's a lucky chance, right? When you play that, just imagine someone streaming that game and that is happening. They will like, whoa, cool. So that gets us maybe publicity in some way. I think it like that, right? I won't want to
I
remove that bug.
Yeah, I'll play devil's advocate over here, where I can simply say the matches happen automatically. For 30
Mhm.
seconds, the player is staring at the screen and doing nothing, right? Right?
Yeah.
How do
Yeah.
you take care of that experience where there is the entire point of creating a game is that it's interactive, right? If I
Hmm.
wanted to watch something satisfying, I could watch something satisfying as a video form. But in this example, if you played the game as well, right? automatic matches don't happen when a level is created in Candy Crush.
So
So how
simple,
do you
right?
will be created behind the scenes?
You can balance it out. You have that matrix, like which all types of candies are together. Just look at it and check the condition for that whole board. If there are candies that are really bursting, then just replace it with another, then check it again to a point where you have no candies bursting. Or maybe you can do that, you can have just one condition where, okay, one time it burst, it's okay, right, to give that feel good. Then then it checks and does not allow other candies to burst, right? It just replaces the candy types. So yeah,
Okay,
so that
so
can be done.
you would set up the grid first and then check if there are any bursts happening and replace that those particular uh,
Yeah,
say candy types and see whether the level is fine, right?
yeah. So it is for the endless mode, right? But for the normal mode that you said, campaign one, you
Hmm.
have these parameters set up by not me, right? By not the game. It is set up by these guys, right? The designers now, right? So this the responsibilities of setting up the game like that now is with them, because they have the fine tuning control over it. So that is
Got
where engineering team is not responsible for that.
you. You were mentioning that you would be checking these and replacing these over here, right?
Hmm.
And setting up these levels. Do you think the scenario, there might be a scenario that might come in where, say, you are replacing these tiles one at a time, right? And
Yeah,
you replace them, and again, you do like a complete run through of all the tiles once they have been replaced in order to make sure
no,
no new matches are happening again,
no,
or
no.
do you think you would set it up in a different way or something?
So the position of the ones that were matching, right? So you need at least three to be concurrent and matching, right? So
Hmm.
because know all these three positions that are concurrent, now you just need to change the other two positions, keeping in mind that uh, there is some different candy. That is it, right? Because you need at least three, right?
Got it.
Even if you have two, it won't burst, then you are happy with it, right? But then you can say there might be another problem, that the surrounding candies, once you replace it, they get burst, right?
Exactly. That's the
Yeah.
problem I was referring to. So over here, how would you combat that in your algorithm when a replacement say needs to happen?
Okay. So looking at that, right? So you also need the three that are matching, and you also need to see some surrounding blocks. What are the candy types, right? So so one hot fix is, you have five types of candies. One candy is for this purpose. Whenever something like this happen, put that candy in, right?
Mm.
Because that won't match anytime soon, right? So that fifth type of candy, right? And then you are good to go. So that is one hot fix. But going ahead, a long-term solution to this can be looking at the side of the candy, the surrounding candy, right? Four to five candies, because that is the max range, right, that you want. And then putting some different candy that might not match, and both of these candies are different, right? So you look at the number. Acha, you have 10 candies, say three candy of this, two candy this, four candy this. So the minimum one you'll add one, then look at the number again. Then the second maximum you'll add that candy.
Got it.
So it
So
reduces the chances. Yeah.
do you think there's a better way to optimize this? Like right now, in my head, what I'm thinking is, okay, you are traversing the entire vector
Mm-hmm.
behind the scene and checking the values adjacent to that particular vector, then
Mm-hmm.
checking the values again after replacement, making sure that there are no adjacent values that are
Mm-hmm.
still. Do you think there's a better way to do it in one go, where I'd simply set up the entire grid while making sure that no matches are happening beforehand?
Yes, there would always be a better way, right? You'll just have to put more brain towards it. So one
Yeah.
way to do it is, to look into, how, for example, uh, you can Google search it, right, and look into how you can manage it. One way. Second way, you don't need to, put up the grid whole and soul and then check it up. You can write an algorithm so that when it is putting up, it checks up simultaneously, right?
Hmm.
Key that are not matching. If it is matching, then replace it with some other candy. Or maybe what you can do is from left to right, you have five candy type one, two, three, then four, then five. Then when you go above, then you start with some three, then you put five candies, right? So that is one thing you can do, right? Why traverse, like, ing, you can traverse it in different ways when creating board, just for the board setup. You can go through the diagonal, right? You can go diagonally, one, two, then three, four, five, then diagonal one, two, three, four, five. But that would be boring. Uh, so that is one way. There can be a lot of ways. I can think of a lot different combination, but they have their own problems, right? So
Hmm.
we might need to, write up all the solutions, then look at, can we integrate them together in some way? So
Got
like five solutions, get the best out of them, integrate it, try to run it, like dry run it. If it works, awesome. If it doesn't, then think about it. So that is how we code, right? We write the code, like dry run it. If it fails, we see why it failed, then we again do that. So yeah, so I'll
got
follow that approach.
Okay. Let's leave the board setup aside. Like one gameplay mechanic that we missed over here is while
Power
setting
ups.
up board outside of the power ups, how would you make sure that you have enough swaps that the player can actually do in the game? So you want to make it procedurally generated, but you also want to make sure that the player can actually do swaps. There might not
Mm.
be a scenario where maybe you placed everything, but the problem is that there are no swaps happening anywhere, no
Mhm.
possible swaps happening anywhere. So
Yeah.
countering, what would a simple algorithm for a candy placement look like, just to make sure that the game is playable?
Hmm. So as you said, you can have n number of swaps, right?
Hmm.
So one is to reverse engineer, right? You
Hmm.
need to have the solution first. Then, okay, cool. I just got something interesting. So that would actually turn the game around. So you have a solution, then you build a board according to it, right? You actually change the position of different candies from the solution, a board solution. You go to the problem board and get that done, because now you have the number of moves, right, that a player can have, and give like five extra moves or three or four extra moves as a leg room to that. So that way you can curb both the problem that you said, Manas, right? Ki if you have, this n number of things going ahead, we don't need the question first. We need the answer first, then get to the question. Reversal of the algorithm that would solve a lot of problems that we just discussed, right? So this is the way actually Baba is you works. So it just clicked, right? I was looking at that game, how it's built, because that has the most complex problems, puzzle problems, that exist. So that guy explained, okay, there can be n number of ways to solve it, but the way I intended it, you'll have to put the brain. But many people would find workarounds, hacks to it, because there can be 100 number of ways, right? So the way I did it, I had a solution, then I reverse build it in such a way that the problem board, you can have only that sort of solution, and when you figure it out, it's a eureka moment.
Yeah, but that works for a very tailored kind of a level, like Baba is you.
Mm-hmm.
What if I want to create an experience, say level 15 for Shubham is basically the difficulty is the same, the objectives are the same,
Mm-hmm.
but the actual way the game plays, for example, is different, right? Or the way the level looks is different, so that a player might have a different experience playing level 15, while another player will
Mm-hmm.
have a different experience playing level 15. So ideally, while what you said might be helpful, but in my head the solution would be, okay, you got a solution board, but the reverse engineering is procedurally generated.
Okay, so what you are saying is ki how can I go ahead and take a solution board and reverse engineer it to be procedurally generated. That is what
Yes.
you are asking?
Yep.
Okay,
So
cool.
what kind of patterns would you use over here to make sure that the experience stays different?
Okay. So the first problem I'll be countering is how do I use this reverse, like how do I make this reverse engineering work, right? So it's just a hypothesis now. So I'll have to sit around, maybe build, a few levels on the paper and look at how these patterns work because I don't know, right? How majorly, this game goes into reverse engineer and works. So this is a possible solution. I'm not saying 100% it will work, but it's an
Hmm.
interesting explorative solution, right?
Okay.
So one way I can do is, also look into, a lot of this documentaries about how these games are made, the developers how they made it, to also get an idea of what they did, because that way you also get to learn about what you are thinking, is it like in sync, or maybe some problem the way you are approaching, they have a better approach. So one way is to do this. Other way, for this hypothesis to work is you'll have to sit around and look for patterns. And once you create, like, I think 5 6 8 matrix, reverse engineer it, you will see patterns, right? Without doing that you can't see patterns. You can say this works or this does not.
Okay. Let me give you a hint, right? So a simple way, basically the key to this solution is, how would you set up a system that recommends matches? So how do you think they are finding matches in the board and saying, oh, you can swap this and get a match over here?
Okay.
If you were to set up such a system, how would you set up? Like the level is already there, you
Mm-hmm.
need to find a match and recommend that match to the player.
Hmm. Okay,
How would
cool.
you?
Let me just think, right? Hmm. Hmm. So in reverse engineering way, it is possible, but we don't know if it is possible or not to create such, because now we know all the solution, right? But if you really need that recommendation to come quick, right? We have a metadata in the backend, right? Of all the candies and all their positions, right? We just need to look at, which swap would be able to uh, have these three candies, in the order. So for that, again, I'm thinking of checking it up, right? Hmm. So there are a lot of checks in this, right? So maybe,
Would you
just give me a
please
second. Let me think.
explain this?
Let me
Yep.
think. Hmm. Okay, so, hmm, hmm. अगर मैं वहां जा रहा हूँ. So a simple way in the data structure of choice I have used is to look into if we have two candies that are close to each other, right? Like adjacent to each other, right?
Hmm.
Then once we identify that, then we need to identify, is there an option of swapping stuff, right? Because we need at least two candies, right, together.
Hmm.
But for some reason I just felt, I just got one more information while talking to you about this, that yes, we need a lot of swaps for it, but we also need a lot of checking for it, right?
Yep.
And for that, I think, we need the power of vector, yes, like uh, the access, but we might need some other data structure maybe. Okay, so that is on the second thoughts. But going ahead, this is my answer. Key, you can see if there are two together, a simple
Hmm.
system, and if you can swap a third one around them, and if it is matches, awesome. So then you can recommend that, right?
Okay. Okay. I think that was my last question. Just to give you like a bit of a hint over here. You look for a pattern basically called an L shape or a T shape in your grid over here, right? That would be where I start.
Hmm.
So if there is
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
an L shape with one candy that's different, that is a
Mm,
pattern that I want to look for in the grid. The
cool.
T shape becomes another pattern
Mm,
for like uh, five matches or
mm,
uh, five candy matches or something, and
mm,
you mix your solution grid and reverse engineer it by basically forcing these L matches. So the L matches can be different, right? It might be a left swap, it might be a right swap. So the
yep.
position might be slightly different. Say there might be five L shapes I want in the level. I want these many to be horizontal, these many to be vertical. Basically,
Mm,
that's all the designer needs to put, and you randomize the position in such a way that okay, that L shape might be in the third row in one for one person. It might be the fifth row for another person,
mm,
and that's basically how you can simply get. I'm just building on top of your solution as well over here, and you can simply get your solution grade or basically how many matches you want to be there potentially. That's what the designer puts in, and your
mm,
algorithm then picks it up from there.
That makes a lot of sense because it's already sorted. Like, yep, it's already some kind of solution.
Cool. Okay, I
So
think you can
cool.
stop screens here for now. I think
Ah,
we've
yeah, sure,
already
sure, sure.
gone overboard as well.
Uh, so one last thing. So
Yeah,
what we are doing is actually what I got to understand. So we have an L-shaped tile, right? Because with those, we already have solutions. So what you did, you didn't look at the board as a whole. You broke it up into L and T-shaped pieces. Put the candy there because it has a solution 100%. Then you put it back on the board, and
yep,
that way you get a board. Ah, good. Love that. Nice. So then you can reverse engineer from there. Ah, so super awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Manas. Got to,
yep.
brainstorm. Love that.
Cool. Any other questions, doubts for me before we wrap up?
Mm, nope, nope, not until now. No.
Okay, sounds good. I think someone from our HR team will get back to you about how we'll be proceeding ahead, whether you've been selected or not. We have a bunch of other interviews lined up as well. So I'll make sure someone from HR reaches out to you as well.
Okay, that would be cool. One more thing, Manas. Thank you for having me here. And can you please share up your LinkedIn profile? I'll love to connect. And this brainstorming session was really awesome. And yeah, so that would be it.
Yep, I'll share it over email as well, or basically with feedback. If I can share some feedback with you as well, I'll share it across over on LinkedIn itself.
Yeah, sure. Have a great day,
Okay.
man.